Thank you. And we breathe. And we notice any feelings present in us. How many of us remember people carrying a pager around all the time? Quite a few of us. How many of us have more than a couple unanswered emails in your primary inbox? Some of us. How many feel guilty about that fact? A few of us. So for those of you who do not know, the pager was a little plastic computer device that could receive a number or a short message. I remember 8, 10 characters, something. It was invented in 1949 and used primarily by physicians in New York City through the 1950s. They were also called beepers, and they got more popular in the 80s and 90s. Now, in the early 1990s, I helped build and run a recording studio / theater / cabaret in Columbus, Ohio. And I had a ball doing that work. At some point, I moved away to get a job in Chicago. I stopped working with that theater troupe. They thrived anyway. And when I moved back to Columbus a few years later, they had built a brand new, bigger, fancier cabaret. I went to their grand opening in a balcony of Shadowbox East. Old place didn't have a balcony. Very cool. And I watched their performance and I just loved everything they're doing. I was so pleased for them. I was so looking forward to meeting them afterwards and celebrating with them. And my pager started going off. And I wrote the code that made the thing buzz, so I knew every 6 minutes it was going to buzz again until I logged into the computer system and fixed whatever was wrong with the database. But I wanted to stay there and watch my friends perform. And to be honest, I wanted to wait until afterwards and hug the pretty girls. I was desperate to stay to the end and in agony, and somehow still feeling pride that I was important enough to have a pager. It was perversely glad. I considered myself fortunate to have a job that could interrupt and interfere with my life at any time. Not long thereafter, on one of our first Thanksgivings together, Becky and I were planning to go see her family for the holiday, and we had to cancel that trip, and she made a last-minute trip to the grocery to salvage a somewhat festive meal while I slogged away on the computer in our home office. And years later, I worked late into the night on the company laptop, which was a luggable, for those of you who remember that term, in a hotel room where my mother was sleeping the night before Mom and I attended the funeral of her father. I'm just glad it didn't interrupt the funeral itself. I'm not mad about it. I probably would choose to do it all again, but it's the choice thing that makes a difference. I was never able to give informed consent. We learned from a young age that work is the most important thing you can do. We asked little kids, what do you want to be when you grow up? Not, hey, what makes you happy? What interests you about living in the world? What questions are you asking recently? Instead, how will you sell your body to our society? Again, some feelings may be coming up. Remember, you can return to that moment, to those sensations. We are in choice. Why am I going on and on about feelings this morning? to the extent that I understand it, and I am still learning, the idea is that our culture pushes productivity over humanity. It's partly capitalism, partly white supremacy culture. The more exhausted we are, the less energy we have to resist, to demonstrate, or to stand up for basic human rights. In a recent Unraveling Whiteness class that I'm taking, people all over the country, they spent a lot of time just encouraging us to engage in our senses and notice the feelings in our bodies. Because the culture teaches us not to do that, to ignore anything below our neck, to not notice any grief or anger which would make us less profitable and more inclined to resist. And when we do experience emotions, well, then the culture has a host of substances to help numb out those feelings for a small fee. Now, one of the good things about all this is that we do not have to demonstrate and fight the man in the streets or the forests near Atlanta. It means that we can also undermine white supremacy culture by feeling our feelings and occasionally taking a nap. The nap ministry. Tricia Hersey calls herself the nap bishop, and her book, Rest is Resistance. We are resting not to do more and come back stronger and be more productive for a capitalist system, she writes. Rest is not a luxury nor a privilege. This is true for all people, she is clear. And as a Black woman, Hersey writes with a particular emphasis, quote, "This book is a testimony and testament of my refusal to donate my body to a system that still owes a debt to my ancestors for the theft of their labor," end quote. Feeling our feelings and taking a nap occasionally reminds me of the Sabbath day in the Jewish and Christian traditions. We are, they say, created in the image of God and have inherent worth and dignity, and we are allowed to rest and feel what we feel. Yes, we work hard, but we take at least one day in 7 off. We have a balance in our life. There's also a more Eastern flavor. Many of the Taoist writers I read talk about simply eating when they are hungry and sleeping when they are tired, and that is the wisdom they offer. Now, capitalism is not this mindless, implacable force. It's not a godlike entity that's moving us around on the board. It is a human-created system which benefits a few at the expense of many. The owner class does want workers to be productive, predictable, and persistent. A couple hundred years ago, European immigrants to this country were taught to forego their old country culture and customs. They were shamed if they skipped work to celebrate one of their old holidays with their families instead of coming in on time. They were told to come to work every day at the same time, work the same hours, which were long, to support the company's profitability. And productivity and punctuality are fine when they are chosen. They become problematic when it's the sole or main constituent of your identity. These folks were taught to earn their whiteness with performance and punctuality. Otherwise, they were called lazy and un-American and non-white, and non-whites were treated worse than whites, so it was really a good thing to be white. And that's why the country doesn't support rest anymore, why overwork is praised, why you still hear people talk about, I worked 60 hours this week, I worked 70 hours this week, as both a cry for help and a boast. And the trade-offs involved here in end-stage capitalism and near-peak white supremacy culture: be silent, consume, and receive the few perks that the owner will dole out. Do not feel. Numb out if you find yourself emotional. Enjoy the distractions of TV and shopping. Do not rock the boat. And we will reward you by allowing you to continue working for fewer benefits and an ever-receding retirement date, and will allow you to believe that all of your sacrifices and all of the sacrifices that you taught your children were worth it after all. In our current culture, it is hard to escape this system. It's hard to make room for humane existence, and we can still do some. We can still do what we can. We can make room for ourselves and each other. Take a nap when you need one. And if you aren't able to rest, acknowledge that and let it fuel your resolve to make changes when you are able, to work with others to make changes when we are able. Feel your feelings. Feel the joy, feel the anger, feel all of our natural, normal human emotions. Allow your feelings to move you to action. Educate yourself, seek others who are aware of these things. Avail yourself of the antidotes that they provide, and share those antidotes that you find widely. Rest, and feel, and breathe. And we breathe as vulnerable, fallible, wonderful human beings. So may we be.